Spring came with all the softness I'd forgotten to notice during the battle. Cherry blossoms blooming on the tree Richard planted the year Malcolm was born. Birds building nests in the eaves. The world continuing, indifferent to human drama, beautiful in its persistence. Malcolm sold the house he'd shared with Daria. Couldn't live there anymore, he said. Too many memories soaked into the walls. He bought a smaller place closer to me, a craftsman with good bones that needed work. We spent weekends fixing it up together, painting walls, refinishing floors, building something new from something broken. Rebecca became a regular presence at Sunday dinners. She fit into our family easily, naturally, without demanding space or pushing for more than we could give. Malcolm moved slowly with her, carefully, learning to trust his own judgment again. "She's good for you," I told him one afternoon while we were sanding cabinet doors in his new kitchen. "She is," he agreed. "But I'm different now. I can't just dive in like I did before. That's wisdom, not weakness." He smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Cost me a lot to learn it. Most important lessons do." The legal aftermath continued quietly in the background. The prosecutor's office investigated Daria's history, following the trail Elise had started researching. They found 3 other families in 2 different states. Similar patterns, similar methods, similar devastation. She'd been doing this for years. Malcolm wasn't her first victim. He probably wouldn't have been her last if we hadn't caught her. The other families reached out through Lionel. Wanted to thank me for exposing her, for making sure she couldn't hurt anyone else. We shared stories over email, compared notes on how she'd operated, found comfort in knowing we weren't alone. One woman, Patricia from Ohio, wrote, "My son didn't believe me until it was too late. Thank you for fighting when I couldn't." I cried reading that email. Cried for Patricia, for her son, for all the families Daria had destroyed. Cried with relief that we'd been lucky enough to catch her in time. Malcolm read the emails too. Read about the other victims, the other families she'd targeted. It helped him, I think, to see that his manipulation wasn't unique. That he wasn't uniquely foolish or blind. "She was a professional," he said after reading Patricia's story. "This was her job. Finding vulnerable people and taking everything. You weren't vulnerable. You were hopeful. Those aren't the same thing." Felt the same to her, apparently. We planted a garden that spring. Malcolm, Rebecca, and me. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, flowers. Rebecca said it was good therapy. I was standing in my hallway, navy shawl draped over my arm, checking my reflection one last time before heading to my son's house for dinner. The clock on the wall showed 5:47 p.m. Malcolm had been so excited about this dinner. His first time hosting me and his new wife Daria in their home together. I told myself I'd be pleasant, warm, accepting. Even though something about her had always made my stomach tighten. That's when my phone buzzed. Lionel Garvey. My attorney of 15 years. The message was only 5 words, but they stopped my heart. "Just call me immediately." I dialed with shaking fingers. Lionel picked up on the first ring, and his voice, normally so calm and measured, was sharp, vibrating with something I'd never heard from him before. Urgency. Maybe even fear. "Corinne," he said, cutting through my hello. "Before you walk into that dinner tonight, you need to know something." My hand went cold against the phone. I remember the shawl slipping from my grip, pooling on the hardwood floor like spilled ink. "Documents have surfaced," Lionel continued, his words coming fast now. "Transfers. Quiet filings. Your new daughter-in-law has been maneuvering behind the scenes, using your son's name, your late husband's estate, and yours." The hallway seemed to tilt. I pressed my free hand against the wall, feeling the texture of the wallpaper under my palm. Something solid, something real, because nothing else felt real anymore. What do you mean? I whispered. What kind of documents? Estate paperwork tied to Richard's old business. You know, the one you haven't touched in years? I was reviewing some routine filings when I found alterations dated only 3 weeks ago. Signatures that look like yours. Notarizations stamped in counties you haven't even visited. My throat went dry. That's not possible. I haven't signed anything. I haven't. I know you haven't. His voice softened just slightly. And beside every single one of these documents, there's a trail. Always her name. Always Daria. Never Malcolm. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor, my back pressed against the cream-colored paint Richard and I had chosen together 20 years ago. The house suddenly felt enormous and empty around me. How bad is it? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Lionel was quiet for a moment, and that silence told me more than words could. Bad enough that you need to know before you sit down at their table tonight. Bad enough that she's been planning this for a while. These aren't mistakes, Corinne. These are calculated moves. I thought about Daria then, the way she'd smiled at me during their wedding reception. Too wide for Malcolm, showing all her perfect white teeth. Too thin for me, barely moving her lips, like I was some distant relative she had to tolerate rather than the groom's mother. I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was one of those mothers who couldn't let go, who saw threats where there were none. There's more, Lionel said, and I could hear papers rustling on his end. Some of these documents involve property deeds, bank accounts, things that could shift ownership if they go through unchallenged. My mind flashed to the small oak table in my kitchen where Malcolm used to do his homework. Where Richard would sit with his coffee every Sunday morning, reading the paper and circling job listings for people he thought might need help. That table had been in my family for 3 generations. The thought of Daria's perfectly manicured hands claiming ownership of anything in this house made my blood run cold. She's after more than money, Corinne. Lionel's voice dropped lower. She's after you. I don't know how long I sat there on that hallway floor after Lionel said he'd send over copies of everything he'd found. Long enough that my legs went numb. Long enough that the light coming through the front door window shifted from gold to amber to deep orange. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Lionel. Malcolm. Calling. I stared at his name on the screen, the photo I'd taken of him last Christmas, his arm around Daria, both of them laughing at something I couldn't remember now. My finger hovered over the answer button. What would I say? How do you tell your son that the woman he loves, the woman he married 6 months ago, is systematically trying to erase you from your own life? The phone kept ringing. 4 times. 5. Then it went to voicemail. I texted him instead, my fingers clumsy on the screen. Not feeling well tonight, sweetheart. I'm so sorry. Rain check? He responded almost immediately. A heart emoji. Just one simple heart, sent with such casual affection that it made my vision blur. I pulled myself up from the floor, leaving the shawl where it had fallen. In the bathroom mirror, I looked older than I had that morning. The fluorescent light showed every line around my eyes, every strand of gray I usually didn't notice. I was 63 years old. I'd spent 40 years as a social worker, fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Children caught in custody battles. Elderly people being taken advantage of by their own families. I'd seen every kind of manipulation, every brand of betrayal. I'd testified in court dozens of times. I knew how predators operated, how they isolated their victims, how they built trust before striking. And I'd invited one into my family. Welcomed her with open arms. The worst part? I'd seen the signs. Small things, easy to dismiss. The way Daria would answer questions directed at Malcolm. How she'd started referring to our assets when talking about things that were clearly his alone. That comment she'd made at Sunday brunch 3 weeks ago, the one I'd laughed off, "Paperwork can change everything, can't it, Corinne?" She'd been watching me when she said it. Smiling. Testing me. I walked to Richard's old study, a room I usually avoided because it still smelled faintly of his cologne. Cedar and something spicy I could never name. The metal file cabinet stood in the corner, covered in a thin layer of dust. I hadn't opened it since he died 4 years ago. Couldn't bring myself to sort through decades of his careful record-keeping, his neat handwriting on folder tabs.
Now I needed those records. Needed proof that whatever Daria had created was fiction. My hands trembled as I pulled open the top drawer. Manila folders, organized by year, by category, by Richard's methodical system that I'd once teased him about. "No one needs this much organization," I used to say. He'd just smile and kiss my forehead. "You never know what might matter someday." He'd been right. I pulled out a thick folder labeled Estate Planning, Original Drafts, and carried it to the desk. Inside were handwritten pages in Richard's looping script. Notes, corrections, thoughts about what he wanted to leave behind. Our original will, complete with all his margin notes explaining his reasoning. And beside those pages, I could already see the differences Lionel must have found. Subtle changes in language. Shifts in beneficiaries. Alterations that, if they went through, would leave me with almost nothing while funneling assets into accounts I didn't recognize. Something else caught my eye. A signature at the bottom of one of the fraudulent documents. Witnessed by Thomas Chun, Notary Public. Thomas Chun had been Richard's best friend. He'd stood beside us at our wedding. He'd been there when Malcolm was born. And he'd died 3 years ago. I'd given the eulogy at his funeral. My hands started shaking so badly I had to set the papers down. Daria hadn't just forged my signature. She'd used a dead man's name to make it look legitimate. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about money or property or inheritance. This was about erasing me completely. Making it look like I'd signed away everything willingly, leaving no trace of my voice, my choices, my existence in my own family story. And she wasn't working alone. Someone had helped her with these forgeries. Someone who knew enough about notary stamps and county records to make this look real. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Malcolm. "Feel better, Mama. Daria says we'll reschedule. She made your favorite, pot roast. Saving you leftovers." I stared at those words. At the casual mention of Daria's kindness. At my son's complete innocence about what was happening right under his nose. Would he even believe me if I told him?
I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, that same oak table where Malcolm had done his homework, where Richard had read his Sunday papers, and I let myself remember everything I'd been trying not to see. The first time I met Daria was at a gallery opening downtown. Malcolm had been nervous, fidgeting with his collar, adjusting his watch every few minutes. "Mom, I really want you to like her," he'd said, and the desperation in his voice had made my chest ache. My son was 42 years old, divorced once already, and he'd sounded like a teenager introducing his first girlfriend. She'd walked in wearing cream silk and heels that made her tower over everyone. Beautiful in that untouchable way, sharp cheekbones, hair so perfect it looked painted on. When Malcolm introduced us, she'd taken my hand with just her fingertips, like I might be contagious. "Mrs. Atwood," she'd said, her voice smooth as glass. "Malcolm talks about you constantly." But her eyes had been cold. Calculating. Taking inventory of my department store dress, my sensible shoes, my silver hair that I'd stopped coloring years ago because Richard had said he loved it natural. I told myself I was being judgmental. That I was one of those mothers, the ones who think no woman is good enough for their sons. I'd spent the whole evening trying to like her, asking about her work in real estate development, complimenting her taste in art, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Malcolm had been glowing. That's what I remember most. He couldn't stop looking at her, touching her elbow, bringing her champagne. He'd looked happy in a way I hadn't seen since before his divorce. So I'd swallowed my doubts. I'd smiled. I'd welcomed her. The wedding came fast. Only 4 months after that gallery opening. Daria had wanted something intimate and elegant, which apparently meant I got invited but not consulted. The ceremony was at some vineyard 2 hours away, all white roses and string quartets. I'd worn my best dress, sat in the front row, and watched my son promise forever to a woman whose eyes never quite reached mine. At the reception, I tried to talk to her. Really talk, mother to daughter-in-law talk. I'd found her by the cake table, alone for once, checking her phone. Daria, I'd said, I just wanted to tell you how happy I am that Malcolm found you. He deserves someone special. She'd looked up from her screen, and for just a second, her polished mask had slipped. Her eyes had gone flat, almost reptilian. Then the smile snapped back into place. Thank you, Corinne. That means so much. But she'd said my name like it tasted bad. Like she was testing how it felt in her mouth. Then came the small things. The red flags I'd ignored because I didn't want to be difficult. Malcolm stopped calling as often. When he did, Daria was always there, always listening, always adding her commentary. Your mother sounds tired, honey. Maybe we should let her rest. Corinne probably doesn't want to hear about our vacation plans. I'm sure your mom has her own life to worry about. They'd started making decisions without telling me. Selling Malcolm's condo, the one Richard had helped him buy, without mentioning it until after the papers were signed. Opening new bank accounts. Changing their address to a gated community where I'd need a pass to visit. It's just easier this way, Mom, Malcolm had explained when I'd asked why they hadn't told me about the move. Daria handles all our finances now. She's really good at this stuff. I'd bitten my tongue. Said something supportive. Gone home and cried into my pillow like I was the one being unreasonable. There'd been that Sunday brunch 3 weeks ago. Daria had insisted on hosting, even though their new house wasn't fully furnished yet. I'd brought flowers, yellow roses, Malcolm's favorite. Daria had taken them without looking, set them on the counter still wrapped in paper. We'd been sitting at their glass dining table. Everything in that house was glass or chrome or white, nothing soft or lived in, when Daria had started talking about estate planning. Just casually, like it was normal conversation over Eggs Benedict. Malcolm and I have been organizing all our paperwork, she'd said, cutting her food into precise little squares. Making sure everything's in order. You'd be surprised how complicated these things can get. She'd looked directly at me then. Paperwork can change everything, can't it, Corinne? I'd frozen with my coffee cup halfway to my lips. There'd been something in her tone, something knowing and sharp. Malcolm had just nodded along, oblivious, talking about how grateful he was that Daria was taking care of all this boring stuff. I should have asked questions. Should have demanded to know what paperwork she meant. Instead, I'd laughed it off, changed the subject to the weather, acted like everything was fine. Now, sitting alone in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, I wanted to scream at my past self. Wake up, I wanted to shout. She's telling you exactly what she's doing. She's testing you, seeing if you'll notice, if you'll fight back. But I hadn't noticed. Or I had, and I'd chosen not to see it. I'd been a social worker for 40 years. I'd written reports on financial exploitation. I'd testified in court about predators who isolated vulnerable people from their support systems, who forged signatures, who manipulated paperwork to steal inheritances. I knew every warning sign, every tactic, every move. And I'd missed them all when they were happening to me. Maybe because I'd never thought I could be vulnerable. I was Corinne Atwood, strong, independent, sharp. I'd raised Malcolm alone after Richard died. I'd managed my own finances, paid off the mortgage, built a comfortable retirement. I didn't need protecting. Except that's exactly what predators count on. They don't target people who look weak. They target people who have something worth taking. The sun came up while I was still sitting there, turning the kitchen window from black to gray to gold. I hadn't moved in hours. My coffee had gone cold in the cup, untouched. My phone buzzed. A text from Elise Navarro, my neighbor 3 houses down. Elise and I had been friends for 20 years, ever since she'd moved in with her husband Marco. She was a retired paralegal, sharp as a tack even at 70. The text said, "Saw your light on all night. You okay? I'm bringing coffee and muffins. Don't argue." 10 minutes later, she was at my door with a paper bag and 2 travel mugs. She took one look at my face and didn't ask if I was okay. Just walked straight to the kitchen, set down the food, and said, "Tell me." So I did. I told her about Lionel's call, about the forged documents, about Daria's trail through my late husband's estate. I told her about Thomas Chen's signature, about the notarizations in counties I'd never visited, about the paperwork that could shift ownership of everything Richard and I had built. Elise listened without interrupting, her face getting harder with each detail. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, stirring sugar into her coffee even though she took it black. "How long has Daria been in Malcolm's life?" she finally asked. 10 months. They met last November. And married in March? April. 4 months. Elisa's jaw tightened. "Corinne, this is textbook. The quick courtship, the isolation from family, the sudden interest in finances." She targeted him. Hearing it said out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. My son, my sweet, trusting son who still believed in love after his divorce broke his heart, had been hunted. "We need to see exactly what we're dealing with," Elise said, pushing her coffee aside. "Call Lionel. Tell him I'm helping. Between his legal access and my paralegal experience, we can pull this apart piece by piece." And that's what we did. For the next 3 days, my house became a war room. Elise brought her old laptop and reading glasses. Lionel came over with boxes of files, spreading documents across my dining room table until we couldn't see the wood anymore. We found property tax records showing transfers in progress. Email confirmations with timestamps, most sent between midnight and 3 in the morning. PDF metadata showing that documents had been edited on a laptop registered to Daria's name. Elise was the one who caught the detail about Thomas Chun. She'd pulled up his death certificate, compared the dates, and let out a low whistle. She didn't just forge signatures. She used a dead witness. That's bold. That's also stupid, because it's easy to prove. We found 4 other witness signatures. 2 belonged to people we couldn't locate anywhere in public records, probably fake names. 1 belonged to a notary whose license had been revoked 2 years ago. The last was someone Daria apparently worked with, but the signature was dated on a day when county records showed that notary was in a completely different state. Every piece of evidence felt like a punch to the chest. Not just because of what Daria had done, but because of how close she'd come to getting away with it. "Look at this," Lionel said on day 3, holding up 2 documents side by side. "This is your original will. This is the altered version. See how she changed the executor from Malcolm to herself. And this clause here, the one about the family home, she's rewritten it so ownership transfers to a joint trust that she controls." "What does that mean?" I asked, even though part of me already knew. "It means she was setting up to take everything. The house, the savings accounts, Richard's pension benefits that still pay out to you. She's rewritten your life story with herself as the main character. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against the table to make them stop. That's when Elise found the property deed. The one that had already been prepared for transfer. "Corinne," she said, her voice careful. "Your house. It's already been filed for transfer into Daria's name. The only thing stopping it from going through is a 30-day review period. That period ends in 5 days." The room went silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. 5 days. If we hadn't caught this, if Lionel hadn't been thorough, if I'd waited even one more week. My family home, the place where I'd raised my son, where Richard had died in our bedroom with my hand in his, would have belonged to a woman who'd known me less than a year. "We file for an emergency injunction," Lionel said, already reaching for his phone. "First thing tomorrow morning. We freeze everything, the deeds, the accounts, all of it. We'll need to move fast." But I wasn't listening anymore. I was staring at that property deed, at my forged signature at the bottom, at the notary stamp from a county 3 hours away. I was thinking about Malcolm's text from last night. "Daria says we'll reschedule. She made your favorite, pot roast." She'd been cooking my favorite meal while preparing to take my home. "There's something else," I said quietly. "Someone helped her do this. Someone who knows how to forge notary documents, how to navigate county systems, how to make this look legitimate." Lionel and Elise exchanged looks. "You're right," Lionel said. "These aren't amateur mistakes. This took expertise. Which means Daria has a partner. Someone who's done this before." The question hung in the air between us, heavy and dark. How many other families had Daria destroyed before mine? The emergency injunction came through on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in Lionel's office, hands folded in my lap, trying not to throw up from nerves. The judge had reviewed our evidence, the forged signatures, the dead witness, the metadata, all of it, and granted a temporary freeze on every transaction tied to my estate. Lionel hung up the phone and looked at me with something like relief in his eyes. "It's done. Nothing can be transferred, sold, or moved until this gets sorted out in court. Your house is safe. Your accounts are safe." I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. Because freezing the accounts meant Daria would know we'd caught her. Which meant I'd have to face Malcolm. And Malcolm would have to face the truth about the woman he'd married. "How long do we have before she finds out?" I asked. "Hours, maybe. The court will notify all parties involved. She'll get the paperwork by end of day." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. Elise reached over and squeezed my hand. She'd insisted on coming with me, said she didn't trust me to drive myself home after. "What happens next?" I asked. Lionel leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. "Now we wait. She'll either come at us with her own lawyers, trying to prove the documents are legitimate, or she'll run. Given how carefully this was planned, my money's on lawyers." "And Malcolm?" The question hung heavy between us. Lionel's expression softened. "You'll have to tell him, Corinne. Before Daria spins this her way. Before she convinces him that you're the villain in this story." My throat went tight. What if he doesn't believe me? "Then you show him the evidence. You let the truth speak for itself." Lionel pushed a folder across his desk toward me. I made copies of everything. The original will with Richard's handwriting. The forged documents. The timeline. Thomas Chen's death certificate. All of it. I stared at that folder like it was a bomb. In a way, it was. Opening it would blow apart my son's marriage, his trust, maybe even his relationship with me. But not opening it would cost me everything. I took the folder home and spent the rest of the day trying to figure out what to say. How do you tell your child that he's been manipulated? That the woman he loves has been systematically destroying his family? I drafted texts and deleted them. Started phone calls and hung up before they connected. By evening, I still hadn't decided. I was sitting at my kitchen table, that oak table again, witness to every important moment of my life, when my phone rang. Malcolm. My hand shook as I answered. Hi, sweetheart. Mom. His voice was tight. Angry. What the hell is going on? So Daria had gotten to him first. Of course she had. Malcolm, I need you to listen. Daria just got papers from a court. Something about an injunction? About Dad's estate? She's saying you're trying to cut her out of the family, that you've never accepted her, that you're using Dad's money to control me. Each word hit like a slap. That's not what's happening. Then what is happening? He was almost shouting now. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you can't handle that I'm married again. That I'm happy. Are you happy? The question came out before I could stop it. Silence. Long enough that I could hear his breathing, sharp and uneven. What kind of question is that? He finally said. An honest one. Are you happy, Malcolm? Or are you just going along with whatever Daria tells you to do? Jesus, Mom. You sound paranoid. Then come see me. Come look at what I found. Let me show you the documents, the signatures, the timeline. Then you can decide if I'm paranoid or if I'm protecting you. Another silence. This one felt different. Uncertain. I can't just drop everything, he said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. Daria needs me right now. She's upset. I'm sure she is. I kept my tone neutral, even though I wanted to scream. But I'm your mother. And I'm asking you to come hear my side before you decide I'm the enemy. I never said you were the enemy. You didn't have to. He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, tomorrow. I'll come by tomorrow after work. But this better be good, Mom. This better be real. It's real, I said. I wish it wasn't. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there holding the phone, listening to the dead air, feeling like I'd just survived something but couldn't name what. Elise had warned me this would happen. He'll defend her at first, she'd said. It's human nature. Admitting you've been fooled is harder than staying fooled. That night, I pulled out old photo albums. Pictures of Malcolm as a baby, as a kid with missing front teeth, as a teenager trying to look tough in his first suit. Pictures of him with Richard, both of them laughing at some joke I couldn't remember. Pictures of his first wedding, the one that had ended badly but at least had ended honestly. I needed to remember who my son was. Not the man Daria was shaping him into, but the boy I'd raised. The one who used to bring me dandelions and call them flowers. The one who'd cried at his father's funeral and then held my hand during the entire service, trying to be strong for both of us. That boy was still in there somewhere. I had to believe that. Malcolm showed up at 6:30 the next evening, still in his work clothes, rumpled shirt, loosened tie. He looked exhausted. Older than his 42 years. Hey Mom, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Come in, sweetheart. He followed me to the kitchen table, where I'd laid out the folders in careful order. Original documents on the left. Forged ones on the right. Evidence in the middle. Before you say anything, I started, I want you to know I love you. Everything I've done has been to protect you and to protect what your father built for us. That's it. Nothing else. Malcolm nodded, still not looking at the papers. Daria says you've always hated her. I've never hated her. I've been cautious about her. There's a difference. She says you can't handle that she's successful, that she makes more money than Dad did, that she's... Malcolm. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Look at these documents. Please. Then we can talk about what Daria says. He finally looked down. I watched his face as he processed what he was seeing. The confusion first, then the concentration, then the slow dawning horror as he started to understand. This is Dad's handwriting, he said, touching the original will. Yes. And this. He picked up one of the forged documents. This is supposed to be his too. That's supposed to be mine. My signature. Except I never signed it. Look at the date.
I was in Florida that week, visiting your Aunt Marie. I have plane tickets, hotel receipts, dozens of witnesses. Malcolm's hands were shaking now. He picked up another document, then another. His face had gone pale. Thomas Chun witnessed this? He looked up at me, and I saw the exact moment he remembered. Mom, Thomas died. He died 3 years ago. I know. But this document is dated 2 months ago. I know. He set the papers down like they were burning him. No. No, there has to be an explanation. Maybe someone made a mistake with the dates, or… Malcolm. I reached across the table, but he pulled back. There are 4 different forged witnesses across these documents. 2 don't exist at all. 1 had his notary license revoked. And Thomas is dead. That's not a mistake. That's deliberate fraud. Daria wouldn't. But he didn't sound convinced. He sounded desperate. I pulled out the property deed. This is the transfer document for this house. Your childhood home. See that signature? That's supposed to be me agreeing to transfer ownership to a joint trust controlled by Daria. Do you think I would sign away the house your father and I bought together? The house where you took your first steps? Maybe you were setting up estate planning. People do that. Not to benefit a daughter-in-law they've known for 10 months. Not without telling their son. I pulled out the bank statements next. And these accounts? The ones she's been siphoning money from? Those were set up by your father specifically for your inheritance. Every penny in there was meant for you. Malcolm stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. He paced to the window, hands in his hair, breathing hard. Why would she do this? He finally asked, his voice breaking. Why would she marry me if she was just going to? Because you're a good man with a family estate worth protecting. Because you trusted her. Because she could. He turned to face me, and the look in his eyes broke my heart. How long have you known? A week. Since the night I was supposed to come to dinner. And you didn't tell me right away because you thought I wouldn't believe you. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. Yes. You were right. He sank back into the chair, head in his hands. If you'd told me last week, I would have called you jealous. I would have defended her. I would have. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, what have I done? You fell in love. That's not a crime. I let her into our family. I gave her access to everything. I practically handed her the keys to destroying you. You didn't know. I should have known. He was crying now, really crying, the way he had at his father's funeral. Dad always said to trust my gut. And my gut kept telling me something was off, but I ignored it because I wanted so badly to believe I could be happy again. After Sarah left, after the divorce, I just wanted someone to love me. I moved around the table and pulled him into a hug. He collapsed against me, and for a moment he was 8 years old again, crying about a scraped knee, believing his mother could fix anything. Except I couldn't fix this. None of us could. The damage was done. When Malcolm finally pulled away, he wiped his face with his sleeve. What do I do now? You tell the truth. You cooperate with Lionel and the court. And you figure out who you want to be on the other side of this. He nodded, looking lost. She's going to fight this, isn't she? Probably. And our marriage? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We both knew that marriage was over the moment the injunction was filed. You can't build a life with someone who tried to erase your family. Malcolm stayed for another hour, going through documents, asking questions, piecing together the timeline of his own manipulation. When he finally left, he hugged me at the door and whispered, "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry." "I know, baby. I know." After he drove away, I went back to the kitchen and cleared the table. Put all the documents back in their folders, stacked them neatly by the wall. The house felt too quiet, too empty. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you've won. You haven't seen anything yet." My blood went cold. I showed the text to Lionel the next morning. He immediately filed a report and requested additional security measures. "She's escalating," he said. "Cornered animals get dangerous." He was right. 3 nights later, someone broke into my house while I was sleeping.
The sound that woke me wasn't loud, just a soft click from downstairs, like the front door closing. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed it. Then I heard footsteps. Someone was in my house. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Dialed 911. Whispered my address to the dispatcher. "Someone's inside. I'm upstairs in my bedroom. Please hurry." The footsteps were moving through the living room now. Purposeful. Not trying to be quiet anymore. Like whoever it was didn't care if I heard. I could hear drawers opening. Papers rustling. Someone was going through my things. "Ma'am, officers are 2 minutes away," the dispatcher said in my ear. "Stay on the line. Stay where you are. Don't confront the intruder." But I knew what they were looking for. The documents. The evidence. The proof that would bury Daria in court. The footsteps started up the stairs. My bedroom door had a lock, one of those old push-button kinds that wouldn't stop a determined person but might buy me seconds. I turned it as quietly as I could and backed toward the corner of the room, phone still pressed to my ear. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I could see the shadow of someone's feet in the gap under the door. Just standing there. Waiting. Then the doorknob turned. Once. Twice. Testing it. "Police are pulling up now," the dispatcher said, and I could hear sirens in the distance. The shadow disappeared. Footsteps thundering back down the stairs, faster now. The front door slamming. An engine starting. By the time I made it downstairs, shaking so hard I could barely walk, police cars were flooding my street with blue and red lights. Officers swept through my house, checking every room, every closet, every corner. My study had been ransacked. File cabinets pulled open, papers scattered across the floor. But the important documents, the ones I'd shown Malcolm, were gone. Someone had known exactly which folders to take. "Any idea who might have done this?" the officer asked, pen poised over his notepad. "Yes," I said. "I know exactly who." The fingerprints came back 2 days later. They matched a man named Derek Russo, Daria's cousin. Criminal record including fraud, identity theft, and forgery. He'd done time in 3 different states. So that was Daria's partner. Her accomplice. The one who knew how to forge notary documents and navigate county systems. Family business, apparently. Lionel filed an emergency motion to include the break-in as evidence of witness tampering and destruction of evidence. The judge was not pleased. A warrant was issued for Derek Russo's arrest, and additional charges were filed against Daria for conspiracy. But the damage was done. Our originals were safe. Lionel had copies locked in his office, and the court had the documents on record, but the violation felt deeper than missing papers. Someone had been in my home, in my space, had stood outside my bedroom door while I cowered inside. I didn't sleep in that house for a week. Stayed with Elise instead, camping out in her guest room like a refugee from my own life. Malcolm called every day, his voice tight with guilt. This is my fault. I brought her into our lives. I gave her the keys to your house, Mom. Stop, I told him. You didn't know who she was. Neither did I until it was almost too late. But he couldn't forgive himself. I could hear it in every conversation, every apology. My son was drowning in shame, and I didn't know how to throw him a lifeline. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Daria hired an expensive legal team, paid for with money she'd siphoned from Malcolm's accounts, according to the bank records Lionel subpoenaed. She was fighting back hard, claiming the documents were legitimate, that I was confused, possibly suffering from early dementia, that Malcolm and she had been trying to help me organize my affairs. It was a smart strategy. Turn the victim into the villain. Make me look incompetent. Make Malcolm look like a concerned son taking necessary precautions. Except we had proof. We had Thomas Chen's death certificate. We had metadata. We had Derek Rousseau's fingerprints in my house. We had a paper trail that showed exactly how the fraud had been constructed. Still, I was terrified. I'd seen court cases go wrong before. Seen guilty people walk away because their lawyers were better, because evidence got suppressed, because juries believed the wrong story. 2 weeks before the court date, something shifted. Daria was supposed to appear at a charity gala, one she'd planned months ago, back when she was still pretending to be a respectable member of society. The event was a big deal, full of local influencers, business owners, politicians. She'd positioned herself as the host, the benefactor, the rising star of our community. Lionel suggested we make our move there. Publicly. If we serve her at the gala, in front of all those people, she can't spin the narrative, he explained. The court has authorized additional injunctions. We can freeze the charity accounts too. There's evidence she's been skimming from those as well.
I wasn't sure at first. It felt cruel, theatrical. But Elise convinced me. She's been performing for months, she said. Playing the perfect wife, the generous philanthropist. Let her performance get interrupted by reality. So I went to the gala. Bought a simple black dress, nothing flashy. Stood at the back of the hotel ballroom and watched Daria work the room in silk and diamonds that probably cost more than my car. Malcolm was there too, at her side, looking hollow. He saw me across the room and his face crumpled, but Daria grabbed his arm before he could move. Whispered something in his ear that made him stay put. The event coordinator called everyone to attention. Daria stepped up to the small stage, microphone in hand, smiling like she owned the world. That's when Lionel walked forward with the papers. He didn't make a scene. Just handed the documents to the event coordinator, who read them: court injunctions, freeze orders, allegations of fraud tied to the charity accounts. The coordinator's face went white. The room fell silent. That heavy, suffocating silence when everyone knows something terrible is happening but no one knows what to do about it. Daria's smile froze on her face. She looked at the papers, then at Lionel, then at me standing at the back of the room. For just a second, her mask slipped completely. Her eyes went cold, calculating, furious. Then she turned to Malcolm and whispered something sharp. He stepped back from her. Actually stepped back, physically putting distance between them. And that's when I knew it was over. Not the legal battle, that would drag on for weeks. But the performance. The illusion. The carefully constructed lie that was Daria's perfect life. The crowd started murmuring. People pulling out phones, texting, taking pictures. Within minutes, everyone would know. The gossip would spread faster than any court ruling. Daria stepped off the stage without another word, diamonds catching the light as she walked out of that ballroom with her head high, playing the role to the very end. But I saw her hands shaking. Saw the crack in her perfect facade. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just hands you papers in front of a room full of witnesses and lets the truth do the rest.
The legal battle should have gone to trial. That's what everyone expected, a long, drawn-out court fight with lawyers arguing over every document, every signature, every keystroke of metadata. But 3 days after the gala, Daria's legal team reached out to Lionel with a settlement offer. She wants to negotiate, Lionel told me over the phone. Her lawyers are advising her to cut her losses. What kind of settlement? Full restitution. All assets returned to their proper owners. Withdrawal of all fraudulent claims. Formal admission that the documents were altered without authorization. He paused. She's backing down, Corinne. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt numb. What about criminal charges? That's trickier. The prosecutor wants to pursue fraud charges, but without a trial, it gets complicated. Derek Russo is still facing breaking and entering, destruction of evidence. But Daria. He sighed. She's got good lawyers. They'll probably negotiate a plea deal, probation, fines, restitution. Maybe community service. She won't do time. So she just walks away. Legally bruised and publicly humiliated, but yes. She walks away. It wasn't fair. But I'd worked in social services long enough to know that fair and legal were two different things. Sometimes you had to take the win you could get, even if it wasn't the win you deserved. The settlement negotiations took 2 weeks. Back and forth between lawyers, arguing over details, over language, over who admitted what. I wasn't allowed in the room, but Lionel kept me updated. She's fighting the formal admission, he told me during one particularly frustrating week. Doesn't want anything in writing that says she committed fraud. That's the whole point. I know. I'm pushing back. Either she admits wrongdoing or we take this to trial and let a jury decide. Finally, her lawyers caved. The settlement was signed on a grey Thursday morning in Lionel's conference room. I wasn't there for that either. Didn't want to be in the same room as Daria ever again, but Lionel brought me the signed documents that afternoon. It's done, he said, sliding the folder across his desk. Everything's been restored. Your house, your accounts, Richard's pension benefits. Malcolm's accounts too. She has to pay back every penny she took. I opened the folder with shaking hands. There it was, in black and white, formal acknowledgement that alterations had been made without proper authorization. That assets would be returned. That Daria Watson-Atwood would make no further claims to the Atwood estate. What about Malcolm? I asked quietly. He filed for divorce yesterday. Fraud is grounds for annulment in this state, but divorce is cleaner. She's not contesting it. Of course she wasn't. There was nothing left to gain by staying married to him. She'd been caught, exposed, humiliated. Malcolm was no longer useful. I wondered how many other families she'd done this to. How many other sons or daughters she'd targeted, married, manipulated. The police were investigating her background now, following the trail backward through other states, other names. But that wasn't my fight anymore. My fight was over. I drove home from Lionel's office in a daze. Pulled into my driveway, looked at my house, the house I'd almost lost, and felt something break open inside my chest. Not relief, exactly. More like exhaustion. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. I sat in the car for a long time, watching the sun set behind the roof, turning everything gold and orange. My phone buzzed. A text from Malcolm. Can I come over? Yes, I texted back. He showed up 20 minutes later, still in his work clothes. He looked thinner than he had a month ago. Older. Like the whole ordeal had aged him years in weeks. Hey Mom, he said, standing awkwardly in my doorway. Come in, sweetheart. We ended up at the kitchen table. That oak table again. The center of every important conversation in my life. Malcolm sat with his hands wrapped around a coffee mug I'd given him but hadn't touched. I signed the papers today, he said quietly. The divorce papers. I know. Lionel told me. I keep thinking about the wedding. How happy I thought I was. How proud I felt introducing her to everyone. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. How did I not see it? Because she was good at hiding it. That's what predators do. They make you trust them. They make you feel like you're the crazy one for doubting. I should have listened to you from the beginning. I didn't know from the beginning. I had a bad feeling, but that's not the same as knowing. She fooled both of us, Malcolm. The only difference is she needed to keep you fooled longer. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. I gave her everything, Mom. I gave her access to our family, our history, our money. I gave her Dad's legacy. And she tried to destroy it. But she didn't. That's what matters. Only because you caught her. We caught her. You, me, Lionel, Elise. We all did this together. He finally looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the little boy he used to be underneath the broken man he'd become. How do I come back from this? It was the same question I'd been asking myself. How do you come back from betrayal that deep? How do you trust again? How do you believe in people when someone you loved turned out to be poison? One day at a time, I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. You wake up tomorrow and you make different choices. You learn from this. You don't let it destroy you. What if I can't? Then you keep trying until you can. That's all any of us can do. We sat there in the fading light, holding hands across the table like we used to when he was young and scared of thunderstorms. Outside, the street lamps were coming on, casting long shadows across the yard. I'm moving back, Malcolm said suddenly. What? Not here with you, but closer. I can't stay in that house, it's full of her. Full of lies. I'm putting it on the market next week. He squeezed my hand. I want to be closer to you. Want to rebuild what I almost lost. My throat went tight. I'd like that. I'm going to make this right, Mom. I don't know how yet, but I will. You don't have to make anything right. You just have to heal. He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe me yet. Healing would take time, for both of us. After Malcolm left, I walked through my house room by room. Touched the walls, the furniture, the photos on the mantel. Everything here had almost been taken from me. Everything I'd built with Richard, everything we'd left for Malcolm. It had all been threatened by a woman wearing pearls and smiling too wide. But it was still here. Still mine. Still standing. I ended up in Richard's study, that room I usually avoided because it hurt too much. Sat in his old chair, ran my fingers over the worn armrests. We did it, I whispered to the empty room. We protected our family. The room didn't answer, of course. But I swear I could smell his cologne. Cedar and that spicy something I'd never been able to name. Like he was there, just for a second, reminding me that some things are worth fighting for. Some legacies are worth protecting. Some families are worth saving, even when it costs you everything to do it. I went to bed that night in my own house, in my own room, surrounded by my own things. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking to check the locks. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just lets you sleep peacefully in your own bed, knowing you're still standing, still fighting, still here.
2 months after the settlement, Daria hosted her charity gala. Yes, another one. Because apparently even public humiliation wasn't enough to make her disappear from our community. She'd planned this event months ago, back when she was still playing the role of benevolent society wife, and she wasn't about to let a little thing like fraud allegations ruin her performance. "She's doing it on purpose," Elise said when the invitation showed up in my mailbox. Cream cardstock, gold lettering, my name printed in elegant script like we were old friends. "She's trying to prove she's untouchable." I stared at that invitation for days. Part of me wanted to throw it away, pretend it didn't exist. But another part, the part that had spent 40 years fighting for justice, knew I needed to be there. "If I don't show up, she wins," I told Lionel during one of our final wrap-up meetings. "She gets to control the narrative, play the victim, tell everyone I'm the vindictive ex-mother-in-law who couldn't handle my son's happiness." Lionel leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You know she's going to use this as a stage, right? She'll position herself as the wronged party. Make herself look like the bigger person. Let her try." So I bought a simple black dress, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. I wasn't there to perform. I was there to exist, to take up space, to remind everyone that I was still standing. The gala was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, the fanciest venue in town. Daria had spared no expense: crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a string quartet in the corner. Everything gleamed with money and pretension. I arrived late on purpose and stood at the back of the ballroom. The room was packed with people I recognized: local business owners, city council members, the kind of people who wrote checks to feel important. They were all dressed in designer clothes and expensive jewelry, sipping champagne like the world wasn't full of problems that money couldn't solve. Daria was at the center of it all, wearing a silk dress that probably cost more than my car. Diamonds at her throat, wrists, ears. Hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. She looked like something out of a magazine, untouchable and pristine. Malcolm was beside her, and that's what hurt most. My son, my beautiful boy, standing there like a prop in her performance. His hand was on her back, but his eyes were dead. I'd seen that look before, on clients who'd been abused so long they'd stopped fighting. Hollow. Defeated. I wanted to march across that room and pull him away from her. But I couldn't. He had to see it himself. Had to wake up on his own. Daria was working the room, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny. She was good at this, the performance, the charm. If I didn't know what she'd done, I might have believed it too. That's when she saw me. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and for just a second, her smile faltered. Just a flicker of recognition, of fear maybe, before the mask snapped back into place. She whispered something to Malcolm, who turned and spotted me. His face went pale. Daria squeezed his arm. I could see her fingers digging in even from across the room, and led him away from me, deeper into the crowd. "She's scared," Elise whispered beside me. She'd insisted on coming, said she wasn't about to let me face Daria alone. "Look at her. She's terrified you're going to make a scene." But I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here to be present, to reclaim my space in this community that Daria had tried to edge me out of. The event coordinator called everyone to attention. Daria stepped onto a small stage at the front of the room, microphone in hand. The crowd quieted, all eyes on her.
"Good evening," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight. This cause is incredibly important to me, and I'm so grateful for your support." She went on, talking about children's literacy or something. I couldn't focus on the words. I was too busy watching Malcolm standing just off stage, his shoulders hunched, his hands shoved in his pockets. That's when Lionel appeared beside me. I hadn't seen him come in, but there he was, holding a manila folder. "Are you sure about this?" he murmured. I nodded. He squeezed my shoulder once, then walked toward the stage. The crowd watched him move through the room, confused by the interruption. Daria saw him coming and her smile went brittle. Lionel didn't climb on stage. He simply handed the folder to the event coordinator, a nervous-looking woman with a clipboard. "These are court documents," he said, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Injunctions related to Mrs. Watson Atwood and the accounts associated with this charity." The coordinator's face went white. She opened the folder, scanned the first page, and her hands started shaking. "What is this?" Daria's voice came through the microphone, sharp now. The mask was cracking. "This is a private event." "These are public records," Lionel said calmly. "The court has issued freezes on certain accounts due to irregularities in the charity's financial management. The coordinator has a legal obligation to inform the board and donors." The room erupted in whispers. People pulling out phones, texting, recording. Daria's carefully constructed evening was collapsing in real time. She looked at me then, and the hatred in her eyes was pure and undisguised. This was my fault, that look said. I'd ruined her performance. Good. The coordinator began reading from the documents, her voice shaking. "The court has found evidence of unauthorized transfers from the charity accounts to personal accounts belonging to Daria Watson Atwood. Pending investigation, all accounts are frozen effective immediately." More whispers. Gasps. Someone near me muttered, "I knew something was off about her." Daria's smile had completely vanished now. She stood frozen under the stage lights, diamonds glittering, facade shattered. She tried to speak, but the microphone screeched with feedback, making her flinch. That's when Malcolm moved. He stepped on stage, took the microphone gently from her hand, and said, "I think we're done here." His voice was quiet but firm. Final. He wasn't asking permission. He was ending it. Daria grabbed his arm, leaned in close, hissed something that made his jaw tighten. But he didn't back down. Just carefully removed her hand from his arm and stepped away from her. Physically. Publicly. Completely. The room went silent again, that heavy silence of witnesses to something irreversible. Daria looked at Malcolm, then at me, then at the crowd of people who were no longer looking at her with admiration but with suspicion and disgust. She stepped off the stage without another word. Walked through the crowd with her head high, chin up, diamonds catching the light. Playing the role until the very last second. But her hands were shaking. I could see them trembling as she passed me, so close I could smell her perfume, something expensive and floral that made my stomach turn. She didn't look at me. Didn't acknowledge my existence. Just walked out of that ballroom like she was walking off a stage after a performance, leaving chaos and whispers in her wake. Malcolm stood frozen on the stage, microphone still in his hand, looking lost. The event coordinator was trying to salvage something, telling people the charity would issue a statement, that donations would be refunded, that they'd get to the bottom of this. But no one was listening anymore. The performance was over. I made my way through the crowd toward Malcolm. People parted from me, their eyes curious, some sympathetic, others just hungry for more drama. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage and touched my son's shoulder. He turned and looked at me, and the devastation in his eyes nearly broke me. "Mama," he whispered. "What did I do?" "You did the right thing," I said quietly. "You chose truth. That's all you could do. She's going to hate me now." "She already did. You just didn't see it yet." He nodded, but his hands were still shaking. I took the microphone from him gently, set it on its stand, and led him off the stage. Elise was waiting at the bottom of the steps, and together we walked Malcolm out of that ballroom, away from the whispers and the stares and the wreckage of Daria's final performance. Outside, the air was cool and clean. Malcolm leaned against the hotel wall, breathing hard like he'd been running. "She told me," he said suddenly. "Just now on stage. She said if I didn't defend her, if I let them humiliate her like this, she'd make sure I lost everything. The house, the accounts, my reputation. Everything." "She can't," Lionel said, appearing beside us. "The settlement's signed. She has no leverage anymore." "But she said." "She's bluffing. Desperate people make desperate threats. That's all this is." Malcolm slid down the wall until he was sitting on the concrete, head in his hands. "I stood beside her in there. I touched her. I was going to defend her until you showed up with those papers." "But you didn't defend her," I said, kneeling beside him. "When it mattered, you chose right." "Barely. I barely chose right." He looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. "How do I live with that? How do I forgive myself for being so blind?" "The same way I'm forgiving myself," I said. "One day at a time. With help. With honesty. And with the knowledge that predators are good at what they do. That's why they're dangerous." We sat there for a long time. Me on the concrete beside my son, Elise standing guard, Lionel making quiet phone calls to make sure the legal side was handled. Inside, the gala had dissolved completely. People were leaving, cars pulling up to the valet stand, everyone rushing to be the first to spread the gossip. By morning, everyone would know. Daria's mask had finally, completely, irreversibly cracked. And Malcolm had been there to see it happen. Had been forced to choose publicly, between the lie he'd been living and the truth he'd been avoiding. He'd chosen truth. That had to count for something. The days after the gala were strange and quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when you're still waiting to see what's been damaged and what's survived. My phone rang constantly, friends, neighbors, even people I barely knew, all wanting to know what had happened, what was true, whether I was okay. I stopped answering after the first few calls. Let them go to voicemail, let the messages pile up. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The truth was public now, documented in court filings and settlement agreements. Let them read those if they wanted details. Malcolm came over every day that first week. He'd show up in the morning with coffee and bagels, sit at my kitchen table, and stare at nothing for hours. Sometimes he'd talk, rambling thoughts about what he should have seen, what he should have done differently. Sometimes he'd just sit in silence, and I'd sit with him, both of us trying to figure out how to move forward. "Her lawyers called," he told me on day 3. "They want to negotiate the divorce terms." "What do they want?" "The house. Half my retirement accounts. Alimony." He laughed, a bitter sound. "She tried to steal everything and failed, so now she's going to try to take it legally. Let her try. Lionel will handle it." But I could see the fight draining out of Malcolm. Every day he looked a little more tired, a little more defeated. The legal battle was supposed to be over, but Daria wasn't done yet. She'd hired a PR firm. That's what Elise discovered when she went digging online. Daria had hired a crisis management company to spin the story, to turn herself from villain to victim. Articles started appearing in local blogs and social media, carefully worded posts about a woman caught in the crossfire of a family dispute, about a rush to judgment by an overzealous lawyer, about financial misunderstandings blown out of proportion. Nothing she posted mentioned the forged documents. Nothing mentioned Thomas Chen's signature from beyond the grave. Nothing mentioned the break-in at my house or Derek Russo's arrest. Just carefully crafted sympathy bait designed to make people question what they'd seen at the gala. And it was working. Some people, anyway. I'd see comments online, "Maybe there's more to the story," Rich families always fight over money. She seems nice. I can't believe she'd do something like that. It made my blood boil. But Lionel told me to stay quiet, to not engage, to let the legal process speak for itself. Public opinion doesn't matter, he said. The settlement's signed. She admitted wrongdoing in writing. That's what matters. But it felt like she was winning anyway. Like even in defeat, she was managing to rewrite the narrative. 2 weeks after the gala, Malcolm's phone rang while he was at my house. He looked at the screen and his face went grey. "It's her," he said. "Don't answer it." "I have to. The lawyers said we're not supposed to have contact, but what if it's important? What if?" "Malcolm." I kept my voice firm. "You don't have to do anything she wants anymore." He stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. Then it immediately started again. "Jesus," he muttered. "She's not going to stop." The phone rang 4 more times. Then a text came through. Malcolm read it and his jaw tightened. "What does it say?" I asked. He turned the phone so I could see. "We need to talk. I have information about your mother you need to know. She's not who you think she is." My stomach dropped. That's manipulation. That's exactly what abusers do. They try to isolate you from your support system by making you doubt the people who love you. I know. But his hands were shaking. "But what if?" "There is no what if. You know what she is. You saw the evidence." More texts came through. Malcolm's phone buzzed continuously, message after message. "She's been lying to you your whole life. Ask her about the nursing home incident in 1998. Ask her why she really retired from social work. I have proof. Let me show you." Malcolm's face had gone from gray to white. "What nursing home incident? What is she talking about?" "I have no idea. She's making things up, trying to create doubt." "But why would she mention something so specific if it wasn't real?" "Because that's what good liars do. They mix truth with fiction to make it all sound believable." But I could see him wavering. Could see Daria's hooks still buried in his mind, pulling at him even now. "There was an incident," I said quietly. "In 1998. A case I worked where a nursing home was accused of neglect. I testified against them. They sued me for defamation, tried to ruin my career. It went on for 2 years before the charges against the home were proven and the lawsuit against me was dismissed." Malcolm stared at me. "Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" "Because you were in college. Because it was handled. Because I didn't want you to worry." "See, he stood up, pacing now. "That's exactly what Daria said you'd say. That you'd have some explanation that sounded good but was actually hiding something." "Malcolm." I stood too, trying to keep my voice calm even though my heart was racing. "Look at what she's doing. She's taking a real event from my past, something painful that I survived, and twisting it into a weapon against me. That's what predators do." His phone buzzed again. Another text. "Ask her about the money. Where do you think it really came from?" "What money?" Malcolm's voice was rising now. "What is she talking about?" "Your father's life insurance. Our retirement savings. Money we earned through 40 years of honest work." My voice broke on the last words. "She's trying to make you doubt everything, including me. Don't let her." "I'm not." He stopped, running his hands through his hair. "I just need to think." "Don't think alone. That's when the lies sound most convincing." But he was already grabbing his jacket, heading for the door. "I need some air. I need to clear my head." "Malcolm, wait. I'll call you later, Mom." He left. Just walked out, leaving me standing in my kitchen with my heart pounding and my hands shaking. This was Daria's endgame. She couldn't take my money or my house, so she was going to take my son. Turn him against me with carefully placed doubts and half-truths. Make him question everything until he didn't know what to believe anymore. I called Lionel immediately. She's trying to turn Malcolm against me. She's bringing up old cases, twisting facts, creating doubt. That's witness tampering.
She's not supposed to contact him at all. Well, she is. And it's working. Lionel was quiet for a moment. Forward me the texts. We'll file a motion for violation of the no-contact order. But Corinne. He sighed. Malcolm's an adult. If he chooses to believe her, there's not much we can do legally. So I just lose my son? After everything? You don't lose him. He's confused. Give him time. But time felt like a luxury I didn't have. Every hour Malcolm spent alone with his doubts was an hour Daria could spend poisoning his mind. That night, I didn't sleep. Just sat at my kitchen table, staring at my phone, waiting for Malcolm to call. He didn't. The next morning, Elise found something. She'd been monitoring Daria's social media, something I couldn't bring myself to do, and she showed up at my door with her laptop. You need to see this, she said. On Daria's Instagram was a new post. A photo of her looking sad but dignified, standing in front of a sunset. The caption read, "Sometimes the truth is complicated. Sometimes families turn against you because you threaten their control. But I know my truth, and I know my heart. To those who have reached out with support, thank you. To those who rushed to judge, I hope someday you'll see the full picture." Hundreds of comments below. Most supportive. Some skeptical. But the narrative was shifting. Daria was becoming the victim in her own story. She's good, Elise said darkly. I hate to admit it, but she's really good at this. My phone rang. Malcolm. Finally. Mom, he said when I answered. His voice sounded strange. Distant. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course. Did you ever take money from Dad's business accounts without telling him? Before he got sick? My breath caught. What? No. Never. Why would you? Because Daria showed me bank statements. Transfers from the business account to your personal account. Thousands of dollars. And they're dated 2 years before Dad died, when he was still healthy. Malcolm, those were legitimate transfers. I was the bookkeeper for the business. I paid household bills from that account with your father's full knowledge and consent. But the amounts are weird. Large chunks at random times. It looks like... Like what? Like I was stealing from my own husband. Silence. Malcolm, I said carefully. Where are you right now? More silence. Are you with her? She wanted to show me the documents in person. She said you'd try to explain them away, but that I should see for myself. My blood went cold. You're at her house? She's not dangerous, Mom. She just wants to talk. Get out of there. Right now. She's violating the no-contact order, and she's manipulating you with doctored evidence. How do you know it's doctored? You haven't even seen it. Because I lived my life. I know what transactions I made. And I know your father trusted me completely with our finances. Daria says you always have an explanation. That you're smart enough to make anything sound reasonable. That's when I knew I was losing him. Daria had gotten her hooks back in, and Malcolm was too deep in the fog to see clearly. Please, I said, hating how my voice broke. Please just come home. Come back to my house. We'll go through every bank statement from those years. I'll show you the receipts, the bills, everything. Just don't stay there with her. I'll call you later, he said. And then he hung up. I stood there holding the phone, feeling like the ground was disappearing under my feet. Everything we'd fought for, everything we'd won. It was all crumbling because Daria knew exactly which wounds to press. Elise was watching me with worried eyes. What happened? She got him, I whispered. She got him back.
I called Lionel immediately. Malcolm's at Daria's house. She's showing him fabricated evidence, turning him against me. This violates the no-contact order, doesn't it? It does. I'll file an emergency motion. But Corinne, if Malcolm went there willingly? He's being manipulated. Can't you see that? I see it. But the court sees an adult man making his own choices. Unless she's physically restraining him or threatening him, there's not much we can do right now. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Paced my kitchen until I thought I'd wear a hole in the floor. Malcolm was with her. The woman who'd tried to destroy our family was now sitting alone with my son, poisoning his mind with carefully crafted lies. My phone buzzed. A text from Malcolm. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. Need space to think. At least he'd left her house. That was something. I texted back, I love you. Whatever you're thinking, whatever she told you, I love you and I'm here when you're ready. No response. The next 3 days were the worst of my life. Worse than Richard's death, worse than the first cancer diagnosis, worse than any of it. Because Richard's death was natural, inevitable. This was a weapon designed specifically to hurt me. Malcolm wouldn't answer my calls. Would only respond to texts with short, cryptic messages, still processing. Need more time. Please don't contact me right now. Meanwhile, Daria's lawyer filed a motion to reconsider the settlement. Claimed there was new evidence that the fraud allegations were based on misunderstandings. Claimed Malcolm was prepared to testify that his mother had a pattern of financial manipulation. Lionel assured me it was a desperate play, that no judge would overturn a signed settlement based on vague accusations. But my hands still shook when I read the filing. Elise practically moved into my house during those days. Made sure I ate, made sure I slept, made sure I didn't spiral into panic. He'll come back, she said over and over. He's your son. Blood is thicker than her manipulation. But I wasn't sure anymore. I'd seen what Daria could do. Seen how skillfully she could twist reality until up felt like down and truth felt like lies. On the 4th day, someone broke into my house again. I woke at 2 in the morning to the sound of breaking glass. My bedroom window this time. A rock wrapped in paper thrown through it, glass shattering across my carpet. I called 911, locked myself in the bathroom, waited for sirens. When the police arrived, they found the rock with a note wrapped around it. This isn't over. Fingerprints came back inconclusive. No cameras, no witnesses. But I knew who'd sent it. Knew what it meant. Daria was escalating again. Lionel filed for a restraining order the next morning. Filed new charges for harassment and intimidation. The prosecutor agreed to reopen the investigation. But Daria's lawyers countered with a restraining order against me. Claimed I was harassing their client, stalking her, making threatening phone calls. It was absurd. I had phone records proving I hadn't called her once. But that didn't matter. The point wasn't to win. It was to muddy the waters, to make everyone question who was telling the truth. This is what guilty people do when they're cornered, Lionel explained. They attack. They go on offense. They try to make themselves look like the victim. But it was working. I could see it in the way my neighbors looked at me, less sympathetic now, more uncertain. Maybe there was more to the story. Maybe both sides were equally at fault. Maybe this was just a messy family dispute that had gotten out of hand. No one seemed to remember the forged documents anymore. The dead witness. The break-in. The evidence that had seemed so clear just weeks ago. Daria's PR campaign had done its job. On day 6, Malcolm finally called. "Mom," he said, and his voice sounded hollow. "I need to tell you something." "Okay." "Daria's lawyers want me to testify. They're saying I can help clear things up, provide context about the family finances." My stomach dropped. "Malcolm, no. If you testify for her, you're helping her rewrite history." "But what if she's right? What if there were misunderstandings? What if we rushed to judgment?" "There were no misunderstandings. She forged documents. She used a dead man's signature. But she says that was Derek. That she didn't know he was doing that. That she trusted him and he betrayed her too." "And you believe that?" Silence. "Malcolm, listen to yourself. She's making you doubt everything you saw with your own eyes. That's what abusers do. They make you question reality until you don't know what's true anymore. Stop calling her an abuser. She's my wife. Your soon-to-be ex-wife who tried to steal your inheritance. Maybe if you hadn't been so controlling with Dad's money in the first place, none of this would have happened." The words hit like a slap. "Is that what she told you? That I was controlling?" "She showed me the transfers, Mom. The ones you can't explain." "I explained them. Those were household expenses. I was paying bills. $10,000 in 1 month for household expenses." I froze. "What?" June 2003. You transferred $10,000 from Dad's business account to your personal account. In one transaction. What household expense costs $10,000? My mind raced backward through years of memories. June 2003. What had happened in June 2003? Then I remembered. "Malcolm's college tuition," I said quietly. "That was your tuition payment for senior year. The business account had better cash flow that month, so your father and I decided to pay it from there instead of our personal savings." "That's convenient." "It's the truth. I can prove it. I have the university receipts, the payment confirmations, everything. Daria says you'll have explanations for everything. That you're good at covering your tracks." "Because I'm not covering tracks. I'm living my life. I'm explaining legitimate transactions that your wife is trying to make look sinister." "Don't," his voice cracked. "Don't call her my wife. We're getting divorced." "Then why are you defending her?" "I'm not defending her. I'm trying to find the truth. The truth is in the court documents. The truth is in the settlement she signed. The truth is in the evidence we showed you."
"I can't talk to you when you're like this," he said, and hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, feeling like I was watching my son drown and couldn't reach him. Elise found me sitting on the kitchen floor an hour later, crying so hard I couldn't breathe. "She's taking him," I sobbed. "She's taking my son and I can't stop her." "No," Elise said firmly, kneeling beside me. "She's not taking anything. He's confused. But confusion isn't permanent. What if it is? What if she's poisoned him so thoroughly that he never comes back? Then we fight harder. We show him evidence he can't deny. She stopped, her face changing. "Wait. The tuition payment. You said you have receipts." "Somewhere. In my files." "Find them. Tonight. Every receipt, every confirmation, every bank statement that shows where that money went. We build a timeline so detailed, so documented, that not even Malcolm's confusion can ignore it." So that's what we did. Elise and I spent the next 12 hours going through boxes of old financial records. Found the tuition receipt from Malcolm's university. Found the check copy showing the $10,000 payment. Found the business account statement showing the transfer and the personal account statement showing the immediate payment to the school. Every transaction matched. Every dollar accounted for. We built a binder, chronological, indexed, highlighted. Proof that I'd been telling the truth. But would Malcolm even look at it? Or had Daria convinced him so thoroughly that evidence didn't matter anymore? He'll look, Elise said, seeing my doubt. He's your son. Somewhere under all that manipulation, he's still your son. The next morning, I drove to Malcolm's hotel. The clerk at the front desk wouldn't give me his room number, privacy policy, but she agreed to call him. He came down to the lobby 20 minutes later, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Mom, I asked you not to contact me. I have something you need to see. I handed him the binder. Everything Daria questioned. Every transaction. Every receipt. The truth you've been looking for. He held the binder but didn't open it. This doesn't change. Open it. Please. Just look. He sighed, but he opened it. Started reading. I watched his face as he went through page after page. The confusion, the concentration, the slow dawning realization. This is the tuition payment, he said quietly, touching the receipt. Yes. You paid my tuition. That's what the 10,000 was. Yes. He kept reading. Found the other transactions Daria had questioned. Found the receipts showing they were all legitimate. Medical bills for Richard's cancer treatment, house repairs, insurance payments. Every single one accounted for. Every single one explainable. She lied, he whispered. She showed me the transfer statements but not the receipts. She made it look like you were stealing, but you were just living your life. Yes. He closed the binder, held it against his chest like it was precious. I'm so sorry. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I let her. I believed her. It's okay. It's not okay. I abandoned you. I questioned everything. I almost testified against you. But you didn't. You're here now. That's what matters. He was crying now, full broken sobs. How do you forgive me? How can you even look at me after what I almost did? I pulled him into a hug, right there in that hotel lobby with strangers watching. Because you're my son. And love doesn't stop just because someone makes mistakes. We stood there for a long time, both of us crying, both of us trying to find our way back to solid ground. When we finally pulled apart, Malcolm's face was red but determined. I'm calling her lawyers, he said. I'm telling them I won't testify. And I'm telling them that if Daria contacts me again, I'm filing charges for harassment. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I let her manipulate me. I almost helped her destroy you. The least I can do is stop it from going any further. He made the call right there, speakerphone so I could hear. Told Daria's lawyers in clear, firm terms that he would not be testifying, that he considered all contact from their client harassment, and that he supported every legal action his mother chose to take. When he hung up, he looked at me with eyes that were finally clear. Finally seeing. She almost won, he said quietly. She almost took everything. But she didn't. We're still here. We're still standing. And for the first time in weeks, I believed it might actually be true.
Malcolm moved back to town 3 days later. Not back to his old house, that was still tangled up in divorce proceedings, but into a small apartment 10 minutes from my place. He showed up at my door every morning for coffee, like he was rebuilding a routine that Daria had broken. We didn't talk about her much. Didn't need to. The damage was done, and now we were just trying to heal around it. Daria's lawyers withdrew their motion to reconsider the settlement. Without Malcolm's testimony, they had nothing. The restraining order I'd filed was granted. Daria was ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me, Malcolm, and my property. She moved 2 weeks later. Just disappeared one night, cleared out her rental house, and vanished. Her lawyers said she'd relocated to another state to start fresh. Good riddance, I thought. But I didn't say it out loud. Didn't want to spend any more energy on her than necessary. The prosecutor decided not to pursue additional criminal charges. Derek Russo took a plea deal for the break-in, probation, and restitution. Daria's involvement was harder to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, so they let it go. It felt incomplete. Like justice hadn't quite finished its job. But sometimes that's how these things end, not with a bang, but with a quiet exit and a sealed file. Malcolm's divorce was finalized in early fall. The settlement was generous to him. He kept the house, his retirement accounts, everything Daria had tried to steal. She got nothing except her own belongings and the legal fees she'd racked up fighting a battle she couldn't win. "It's over," Malcolm said when the papers were signed. We were sitting at my kitchen table, that oak table again, drinking coffee and watching leaves fall in the backyard. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Empty, relieved, angry, grateful." He shook his head. "All of it at once." "That sounds about right." He was quiet for a moment, stirring sugar into his coffee. "I keep thinking about the wedding. How happy I thought I was. How proud I felt." "You were happy. She made sure you were. That's how manipulation works." "I know. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like I was stupid." "You weren't stupid. You were human." He looked at me with eyes that were still learning to trust again. "How did you do it? Stay strong through all of this? I fell apart and you just kept going." "I fell apart plenty. You just didn't see it." "But you didn't give up." "Neither did you. You just needed time to see clearly." He nodded, but I could tell he didn't quite believe it yet. Healing takes time. Forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, takes even longer. That evening, Elise came over with wine and pasta. The three of us sat around the table and toasted to survival, to resilience, to the stubborn refusal to let someone else write our story. "To quiet justice," Elise said, raising her glass. "To family," Malcolm added. "To still being here," I finished. We drank, and for the first time in months, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. The town slowly forgot about the scandal. Moved on to newer gossip, fresher drama. Occasionally someone would bring it up. Whatever happened with that woman who married Malcolm? But mostly people just moved forward. I started volunteering again. Nothing big, just a few hours a week at the community center, helping with estate planning workshops for seniors. Teaching people how to protect themselves from the exact kind of fraud Daria had attempted. It felt good. Purposeful. Like turning my pain into something useful. Malcolm started dating again. Casually, carefully. He brought a woman named Rebecca to dinner one night, a teacher from the elementary school, kind eyes, gentle laugh. I liked her immediately, but more importantly, Malcolm seemed careful this time. Slower. Less desperate to fill the void Daria had left. "I'm not rushing anything," he told me after Rebecca went home. "I learned that lesson." "Good," I said. "Take your time. The right person will still be there when you're ready." Fall turned to winter. The house that had almost been taken from me stood solid through snow and ice storms. I decorated for Christmas, something I'd almost skipped the year before, too buried in legal battles to care about holidays. Malcolm helped me hang lights on the porch, and we laughed about him nearly falling off the ladder. Normal moments. Simple joys. The kind of things you take for granted until someone tries to steal them. On Christmas Eve, sitting by the fireplace with Malcolm and Rebecca and Elise and her husband Marco, I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Peace. Not perfect. Not without scars. But peace nonetheless. "Mom," Malcolm said during dinner, raising his glass. "I want to say something." The table went quiet. "A year ago, I brought someone into this family who tried to destroy it. Who manipulated me, hurt you, and nearly succeeded in taking everything Dad built." My throat went tight. "But you didn't let her. You fought back. You protected us both, even when I was too blind to see it. Even when I turned against you." His voice cracked. "You saved me, Mom. You saved our family. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure I'm worthy of that." "You already are," I said softly. "No. But I'm working on it." We raised our glasses, to survival, to truth, to the family bonds that bend but don't break. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood alone in my kitchen. Looked at that oak table where so many important conversations had happened. Touched the worn wood, remembering Richard sitting there with his coffee, remembering Malcolm doing homework, remembering the nights I'd sat alone trying to figure out how to fight back against someone who was trying to erase me. The table was still here. The house was still here. I was still here. Daria had tried to write me out of my own story. But she'd failed. Because some things, family, truth, justice, are stronger than any manipulation. Some foundations can't be shaken, no matter how hard someone tries. I turned off the lights and went to bed in my own house, in my own room, surrounded by my own life. And I slept peacefully, knowing that quiet justice had won. Putting your hands in dirt and growing something new. She was right. I watched Malcolm dig holes for the tomato plants, his hands steady and sure, and I thought about how far we'd come. 6 months ago, he'd been standing on a stage next to a woman who wanted to destroy us. Now he was here, planting vegetables in my backyard, laughing at Rebecca's jokes about her black thumb. "I killed a cactus once," she was saying. "A cactus. They're supposed to be indestructible." "How?" Malcolm asked, grinning. "Overwatered it. Loved it to death." They both laughed, and the sound filled the yard like music. Elise came over later with lemonade and homemade cookies. We sat on the porch watching Malcolm and Rebecca work, both of them covered in dirt, both of them smiling. "He looks happy," Elise said quietly. "He's getting there." "So are you." I nodded. She was right. The tightness in my chest that had lived there for over a year was finally loosening. I could breathe again. Could sleep through the night without checking the locks 3 times. Could answer my phone without my heart racing. Daria was gone. Derek Russo was serving his sentence. The legal battles were over. The house was mine. The money was secure. My family was intact. We'd won. But the victory didn't feel like I'd expected. It wasn't triumphant or glorious. It was quiet. Simple. Just the ability to sit on my porch on a spring afternoon and watch my son plant tomatoes with a kind woman who made him laugh. That evening, after Rebecca went home and Malcolm headed back to his place, I found myself alone in my study. Richard's old space that I'd avoided for so long. The file cabinet stood in the corner, still holding decades of our careful record-keeping. I pulled out the original will, the real one, with Richard's handwriting in the margins. Ran my fingers over the words he'd written, for Corinne and Malcolm. Everything we built. Everything we were. We did it, I whispered to the empty room. We protected what you left us. The room didn't answer, but I swear the air felt warmer. Like Richard was there, just for a moment, proud of the fight I'd waged to keep our family whole. I put the will back in its folder, filed it away properly this time. The battle was over. I didn't need to keep carrying weapons. A month later, Malcolm and Rebecca got engaged. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet proposal over dinner, a simple ring, a gentle yes. They invited me over to celebrate, and I cried happy tears into my champagne. "Don't worry," Rebecca said, hugging me. "I know the history. I know what he's been through. I'm not in a rush. We're taking our time." "Thank you," I said, and meant it more than she probably knew. The wedding was set for the following spring. Small, intimate, just close family and friends. Malcolm asked me to walk him down the aisle. "Dad can't be here, but you can. You're the one who saved me. You should be the one to give me away." I said yes through tears. Life continued its steady rhythm. I kept volunteering, helping seniors protect their assets. Malcolm kept working on his house. Rebecca kept teaching her third graders. We had Sunday dinners. We celebrated holidays. We built new traditions to replace the ones Daria had poisoned. Sometimes I'd see something, a woman with Daria's build, or a diamond necklace like the one she'd worn, and my stomach would clench. But then the moment would pass, and I'd remember, she was gone. She couldn't hurt us anymore. The story spread quietly through our community, through the networks of families she'd targeted. I became known as the woman who'd fought back, who'd exposed her, who'd stopped her pattern of destruction. People would stop me at the grocery store, at the bank, at the post office. "I heard what you went through," they'd say. "Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for fighting." I never knew quite what to say to that. Thank you seemed wrong. I hadn't done it for them, I'd done it for Malcolm, for Richard's memory, for myself. But I'd nod and smile and say something about the importance of protecting your legacy. One afternoon in late summer, almost exactly a year after Lionel's emergency phone call, I was organizing photos for Malcolm's wedding rehearsal dinner slideshow. Going through old albums, scanning pictures of him as a baby, as a kid, as a young man. I found a photo from his first wedding. Him and Sarah, both so young, both so hopeful. That marriage had ended badly, but at least it had ended honestly. No fraud, no manipulation, just two people who'd grown apart. And then I found a photo from his wedding to Daria. Malcolm in his suit, Daria in her cream silk dress, both of them smiling at the camera. I stared at that photo for a long time, studying Daria's face. Looking for signs I'd missed, clues I should have seen. But there was nothing. Just a beautiful woman in a wedding dress, smiling like brides do. That's what made predators so dangerous. They looked like everyone else. They smiled like everyone else. They played their roles so perfectly that you couldn't see the monster underneath until it was almost too late. I threw that photo away. Didn't tear it up, didn't burn it, just quietly placed it in the trash. Daria didn't deserve space in our family albums, in our memories, in our story. The wedding rehearsal dinner was held at my house. I'd insisted, wanted Malcolm to have good memories here, wanted to replace the painful ones with joy. We filled the backyard with string lights and flowers, set up tables under the stars, invited everyone who'd supported us through the darkness. Elise and Marco, of course. Lionel and his wife. Rebecca's family, who'd welcomed Malcolm with open arms. Friends from Malcolm's work, from my volunteer group, from our church. During dinner, Malcolm stood up to make a toast. He thanked Rebecca for her patience, thanked her family for their welcome, thanked everyone for being there. Then he turned to me. "Mom," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "A year ago, I was standing in a very different place. I was married to someone who was systematically trying to destroy our family. And I didn't see it. I couldn't see it. I was so desperate to be happy that I ignored every warning sign, every red flag, every instinct that told me something was wrong." The yard went quiet. Everyone knew the story, but hearing Malcolm tell it was different. "You saved me," he continued, "when I couldn't save myself. When I was defending the person trying to hurt us. You fought back. You gathered evidence. You built a case. You protected Dad's legacy and my future, even when I was too blind to see that I needed protecting. He raised his glass. To my mother, Corinne Atwood. The strongest person I know. The person who taught me that love sometimes means fighting, even when it's hard. Even when the person you're fighting for doesn't understand. Everyone raised their glasses. I was crying too hard to speak, so I just nodded, mouthed "I love you" across the yard. Rebecca squeezed Malcolm's hand, and he sat back down. The moment passed, the party continued, life moved forward. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up, I found myself back at that oak table. Sitting in the quiet kitchen, listening to the house settle around me. This table had witnessed so much. Homework and arguments. Coffee with Richard. Tears over divorce papers. The documents that had saved our family. Malcolm's apologies. Plans for the future. It was just a table. Just wood and nails and time. But it felt sacred somehow. Like a witness to our survival. My phone buzzed. A text from Malcolm. "Thank you for everything, Mama. I love you more than words." I texted back, "I love you too, baby. Sleep well." Then I turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow, Malcolm would marry Rebecca in a small ceremony at the Botanical Gardens. Tomorrow, we'd celebrate new beginnings and second chances. But tonight, I sat in the peaceful dark of my own house and felt grateful. Grateful that we'd survived. Grateful that truth had won. Grateful that quiet justice had been enough. The wedding was perfect. Intimate and honest, full of real love instead of performance. Malcolm cried when Rebecca came down the aisle. I cried watching him cry. Even Lionel got a little misty, and he wasn't the crying type. During the reception, Rebecca's father made a toast about Malcolm's character, about the courage it takes to start over after being hurt. He didn't mention Daria by name, but everyone understood. Everyone knew the weight Malcolm had been carrying, the shame he'd worked so hard to shed. To Malcolm, Rebecca's father said, "For having the strength to try again. For trusting love even after love betrayed him. For choosing hope over fear." We all drank to that. To hope over fear. To second chances. To the stubborn belief that good things can still happen after bad things try to destroy you. That night, sitting alone in my house after the wedding, I pulled out my journal. I hadn't written in it much during the battle, too busy surviving to document it. But now, in the quiet aftermath, I wanted to remember. Not the pain, exactly, but the lessons. I wrote. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it wears silk and diamonds. Sometimes it smiles at your table and compliments your cooking while planning your destruction. Paper trails matter. Documents matter. The boring, tedious work of keeping records and filing properly. It all matters when someone tries to rewrite your history. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let politeness or hope silence the voice that's trying to warn you. Find allies. I couldn't have survived this alone. Lionel, Elise, Malcolm eventually, they were my army when I needed one. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just the steady accumulation of truth until the lies can't stand anymore. Healing takes time. Forgiveness takes even longer. But both are possible if you're patient with yourself and the people you love. Protect your legacy. Not just your money or property, but your story. Don't let someone else write your ending. I closed the journal and put it away. Someday, maybe I'd share it with Malcolm. Or with his children, if he and Rebecca had them. A reminder that even when things look darkest, even when betrayal comes from inside your own family, you can still fight back. You can still win. The seasons continued their cycle. Another fall, another winter, another spring. Malcolm and Rebecca bought a house. A real house, theirs together, free from any ghosts of past relationships. They talked about starting a family. I kept volunteering, kept helping people protect themselves, kept telling my story when it might help someone else see the warning signs before it was too late. Sometimes people asked if I regretted anything, if I wished I'd seen through Daria sooner, if I wished I'd fought harder or faster or differently. I always said no. You can't live in the past, in the what-ifs and should-haves. You can only learn from it and move forward. Besides, we'd won. Not perfectly, not without scars. But we'd won. My family was intact. My home was secure. Malcolm was happy. Life was good. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything. If this story moved you, if you see yourself in any part of it, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's facing betrayal, or fighting to protect their legacy, or wondering if they're strong enough to survive something that's trying to break them. You are strong enough. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Find your allies. Fight back with truth and patience and quiet persistence. Justice may not roar, but it comes. If you're brave enough to keep standing, if you're stubborn enough to keep fighting, it comes. Thank you for being here with me through this journey. Thank you for listening, for supporting, for believing that stories like this matter. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. And please drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, what this story meant to you, how it resonated with your own experiences. Your comments inspire others. Your stories matter. Your voices create a community of survivors and fighters and people who refuse to be written out of their own lives. Until next time, protect yourselves. Trust yourselves. And remember, you're stronger than you know.